Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me, Natasha Nandini, in conversation with people who know stuff. Today, I'm talking to Easter Bonnifield, who I first met in the early 2000s in London when she was teaching Ashtanga Yoga there. Since then, she has acquired many strings to her bow, including Ayurvedic health counselor, Panchakarma therapist, Agnihotra practitioner, craniosacral therapist, massage therapist, color therapist. And the reason for this conversation, Vedic astrologer. There's actually much more to her than that, but I'll put her website details below for those of you who are curious. She also has an exalted Jupiter, and that's why she has all those strings to her bow. And I hope that makes sense by the end of this conversation. Easter, thank you for joining me. It's so great to see you.
Thank you, Natasha. It's lovely to see you too. Thank you for having me here.
Pleasure. Um, so you've recently relocated from Albuquerque to North Carolina, and you're on the Art of Living Retreat Center in Boone. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Art of Living has a very large center here, and I'm particularly connected with the Wellness Center, Shankara Wellness Center. And it's through here that I get to practice all of those things that you mentioned, and as well as Vedic astrology.
That's great. And is everything slowly going back to normal after Hurricane Helene?
Yeah, it is. It was a very unusual occurrence for around here to have that great of a damage in terms of flooding. And the town itself, Boone, is just coming into the state of being recovered. Most shops are open now. However, there's still many people that are out of their homes and dealing with that situation, but it is getting better. There are other areas that are more hit. For example, more west of us in a place called Asheville, they were really hit very hard there. So it's a recovery time, you could say. But everybody is coming together. That's the theme, or the theme that everybody is talking about, and which is really uplifting everybody, is the support that everyone is giving each other during this time. And Art of Living is doing a lot of volunteering in the community, and we're offering meals as well as places to stay for anybody that's been displaced.
I saw that. Yeah, that's great community spirit there. And
Mhm.
have you checked to see if it was predictable through Jyotish?
No.
No. But it could be, right?
It could be, and I would say yes, it could be. In terms of mundane astrology, so we call that mundane astrology. This is an area into which I am gradually expanding my focus and my confidence. I guess you could say is doing the personal reading, so one-to-one for people. In terms of the larger picture, is something that I'm continuing to study, and that I will eventually give information on. And aligned with that are new moon and full moon predictions, you could say, which is something that will be the first to come out next. What I can say is the last new moon was an eclipse. And before that, we also had an eclipse during the full moon, the solar eclipse, I believe. So eclipses in general will create unrest, will create changes, and that's what I will say on that.
Okay. Well, also the moon is has a special placement within the idea of Jyotish Vedic astrology, which we'll hopefully talk about a bit later. But so in Sanskrit, it's Jyotish, and Jyotis is light, also spiritual light, isn't that right?
That is correct.
And how does that relate to um, Vedic astrology being known as
Mm.
spiritual light?
Mm. So as you said, Jyotish, the spiritual light, the light which illumines, so the light which illumines the self. And this light energy on the day that we were born at a specific time, how all the planets are situated, the grahas in Sanskrit. The grahas, their position in a way you can look at freezing a moment in time. You could say graha is to seize or to hold. So when you were born at that moment in time where all the planets are placed signifies the energy that you were surrounded with, that you are gifted with as you come into the world. So this is the light that shines upon you, the light which you get to navigate through this lifetime experience.
Yes, you mentioned that graha is the word for planet, and you mentioned that it means seized. I also like the word grip because that kind of gives you that feeling. So when you're passing through a particular planetary period, dasha, there is that grip of the influence, isn't it? That's so for me, that's a nice visual to have.
Yeah.
So you have that grip of that particular planet, which hopefully we'll go into detail in a moment. But as as an astrologer, if you were going to explain to someone who doesn't know anything, is that what you would say, or would you add anything else?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, when you were born at that moment in time, these grahas were placed in certain positions, which are connected to certain areas in life, which will then influence how you may experience your life. Yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, just on that note, just to give an example, I guess, like I'm in a subdasha of Mercury, which kind of makes sense because I impromptu wrote that book at the end of last year, and I've sort of impromptu started these conversations, which are all Mercury-based, sort of communication-based aspects or influences.
Mhm.
And, and your if because I mentioned, Jupiter is exalted, you could probably use that as a nice example as to how planets have an influence.
Yeah, so each planet takes their turn in having their predominant influence over us. So, for instance, Jupiter has 16 years of time in which to shed its full force onto you. So, and that will entail whatever Jupiter represents. So Jupiter is seen as the teacher, the guru. Jupiter has very expansive energy, and Jupiter is actually considered well, quite often in astrology, in Vedic astrology, we're like, oh, Jupiter, you have an exalted Jupiter, for example. This is great because this will give you lots of learning. This will give you lots of ability to, learn and retain, also boost you in your, in any type of character you have for teaching. Jupiter also is connected to travel, also connected to spiritual awakenings in sort of more of a traditional sense. Jupiter is seen as kind of a priest, you could say, like a traditional religious scholar type of thing. Now, having said that, it will depend upon where Jupiter is placed in your chart, right? And what other planets are influencing Jupiter. So, for instance, if let's say if Moon is influencing Jupiter, this will give a certain type of quality as opposed to Saturn influencing Jupiter. Now, with that said, so Jupiter has 16 years of influence, and you had mentioned a subdasha of Mercury that you're in. So within that 16 years of Jupiter dasha time period, each planet will have its say within that 16 years because they all have to have a say. And that's divided mathematically. I couldn't tell you. But when Jupiter, for instance, first begins, let's say for that first year in your Jupiter dasha, it'll just be Jupiter influence. And then let's see, Ketu, Venus, Sun, Moon, Mars, Mercury, Rahu, Jupiter, Saturn. Okay, so the first year Jupiter, and then what will happen is you'll that next year it'll go Jupiter, Saturn. So you started out Jupiter, Jupiter, and then you go into Jupiter, Saturn. So what that'll do is that'll shift the focus a little bit as to what is influencing you, and what karmic fruits will ripen for you and what you will experience. And that is the point that is very key to Jyotish, is that these stages of time and the planets that are aligned with us, they highlight what we're here to experience in this lifetime and the manner in which that will present itself. And from that, how we act or react, what we realize, the types of tools we have, what we realize, what we need to do in order to access those tools, will then shape our experience and help us proceed through life, for better or worse.
Yeah. I mean, like over the years, what I've realized is that resistance is futile when it comes to the influence of the planets.
Yes, it is. Yes, resistance is futile. And it's really important to remember that this doesn't indicate that we are blocked or locked in. So yeah, graha, to seize, to grasp, to hold. Containers, graha is like a container. It contains energy, it contains themes, it contains potential for experiences. And so we have that potential. And then what happens is we interact with someone. I have the potential to feel and act a certain way. And then I get on Zoom with Natasha. And then that gets influenced a different way, right? And then we'll hang up and I'll go out down the street and I'll meet someone else. And so that potential for me to act will shift a bit. So even though, so those two interactions, what is set is I will interact with a different person, but what is not set is how I will react, how I will respond, and how that person will respond to me. And from that, what will happen next? What will be the result of that interaction?
You know, maybe it's got to do with resonance in a way. Like certain people get on with other people and certain people don't get on with other people, in the same way that some planets get on with some planets and other planets do not get on with other planets.
Absolutely.
And that's where the conflict is, or harmony, I suppose.
Yeah, and where that conflict resides or where that harmony resides, this is where we learn. So we are always going to come up against people that we don't agree with, you know. Let's say Jupiter and Venus are always going to come together and not agree with each other because their nature, connected to the Vedas, connected to, which we should say the Vedangas, right? Jupiter is seen as the head of all the gurus, and Venus is seen as the head of all the, sorry, Jupiter, head of all the deities, and Venus is seen to be the head of all the asuras, right? So they're both leaders, they're both teachers, but they have different motivations, and one is not better than the other. It is just how they are. But when they come together, and if they have very strong opinions about, well, you know, you should, for instance, Jupiter might say, this is very simplified, but Jupiter might say, Venus, you drink too much, you party too much. Sure, you know, all that spiritual stuff, but you need to stop drinking or partying. And Venus might say to Jupiter, wow, you are just so knowledgeable and holy, but you are so uptight. Come on, you know, come out with us and party a little bit. Although Jupiter does tend to party. But anyway, this is just very simplified. But we have to reconcile that. We have to be able to reconcile our differences, because at the end of the day, my favorite phrase, not my favorite, anyway, at the end of the day, we are not this. We are not the accumulations of our emotions and thoughts and ideas and feelings and experiences. we are, and yet at the same time we are not. That is all the illusion, right? That is all the Maya. We are pure light. We are the light. We are the light that illumines. And our purpose in this life is to be able to strip away all those veils, to come to our pure essence, which is pure radiant light, and connect to everybody else that is that same way, because we all come from the same source of universal divine intelligence.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, just if we stay on it for a second on the idea of how Jyotish is useful, for me, it's useful because if I'm on a down cycle or I'm going through some really heavy stuff, like I've got a couple of friends in India, which was, oh, it's because you're in a Antardasha of Ketu, and like until Ketu is over, then I'm just gonna have to put my head down. And it kind of gives you light at the end of the tunnel,
Mhm, mhm.
so for me, light at the end of the tunnel will prevent excessive spiraling downwards.
Absolutely.
And so that's one way that I find that it's very useful. And in India, as we know, I mean, so many people consult the astrologer for major events such as
Mm.
marriage, um, et cetera, you know, career. And I
Mhm.
think that that's becoming more, it's like we're having a bit of a revival here in the West,
Mm.
you know, because like I remember 10, 15 years ago, I'd just seen an astrologer in India, and he was like, don't wear any charcoal and don't wear any black. And I just bought like a shalwar kameez. It was like gray, and I had to take it back. You know,
Mm.
they asked me, you know, why are you taking? I said, oh, you know, Jyotish said that I shouldn't wear. And he goes, uh-huh. Whereas here they would have like side-eyed me as if, you know, am I
Right.
going a bit loopy? Whereas now I think that that's even possible here, you know, in
It,
the West.
yeah, I agree with you, and I think it is to do with the fact that everybody's consciousness is starting to become more and more higher and more accepting of the fact that there is this energy that pervades, and there is there is there are consequences to our actions. There are consequences to the way that we think, and consequence just meaning, you know, a product of, let's say, there are products that are created when we think and when we act. And so there there's much more, okay, you know, there's much more information also available, and more sort of, you could say, barrage. Even that is getting a little bit overwhelming, but through Instagram or Facebook on enlightenment, you know, and people are becoming more open to discussing things that are bothering them, and how they don't feel, you know, there's no more of this projection of, oh, I'm perfect, and oh, yeah, I do this and I'm perfect and I've never had any problems in my life. You know, people are becoming more open with what their life experiences, and there's more of an acceptance of people wanting to live life in a higher vibration of, you know, people are getting tired of, ooh, there's a sorry, and focusing on, yeah, not being dragged down, you know, and accepting, yes, there are very challenging times, and with astrology, like you said, you know, okay, there's this time period where this challenging influence is going to be the most. So in a way, I have permission, if I'm of that personality type, to not try everything I can, to not experience that. I have to do something to change it. And Jyotish says, well, you can try, but right now, the best thing for you to do is ride this challenge. Here are the things that you can do to ameliorate the heaviness of that, of this experience, like meditation, perhaps eating these foods, perhaps on this day doing this type of chanting, perhaps on this day connecting with your community and doing volunteer work. So what's beautiful about Jyotish is that it offers you tools and guidance during those times as to what to do. So you're not just 100% giving up, but you're recognizing, okay, challenging time now, and that's okay because this is what life is. Life is about challenge and rewards and ups and downs. So this is how I understand how to live through those ups and downs with equanimity. And these are the tools that I have at my disposal to support me so I can still maintain a happy, joyful existence.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think it's useful if you have, for example, a project that you want to begin. If you
Mm.
see that the time is not the right, it's not the right moment, it kind of helps. It kind of helps to wait so that when the time is fruitful, that it will then be more successful. And this is one of the reasons, I guess, why in India they use Jyotish a lot. In
Yes, yeah,
fashion.
yes, yeah. So muhurta. So this is the phrase for yeah, finding the right muhurta, finding the right time to begin something, and this is connected with the nakshatras. So the nakshatras are asterisms, so contained within the constellation. So there are 27 nakshatras placed within the 12 constellations. And each one of these provide more detail as to what may unfold during that time period. And they also give great insight into our state of mind, our thinking patterns, our emotional patterns. And so the muhurtas are based upon the timing of nakshatras because they also each represent when is a good time to get married, when is a good time to buy a house, when is a good time to dig a well, or perhaps that would be when is a good time to start building the house, when is a good time to work with your finances. So yeah, the muhurta, and this is because of energy, right? The interaction between the sun and the moon and the earth and our total traveling through space and time, and the energy that gets exchanged through that, and this affects us on a subconscious level, on a subtle level. Subtle being implying a sort of quiet presence, and completely untrue because subtle is the most profound thing that we experience, and it's the subtle energies that continue to shift and come together and produce us to exist and create and experience.
Now, I will get back to the nakshatras in a little while. I think it would be a good idea at this moment to just create a picture for those who nakshatras might be a little bit too much information for those who are not too familiar with the basics. Let's say I'm going to ask you, Easter, if you would like to show us a chart. So let's look at this. Let's see houses, planets. Obviously, the moon will play a big part in this, and then we've got the dasha, mahadasha, antardasha. And if you are able for us to put this into a picture using the share screen that we just talked about earlier, you and me, that would be useful.
Okay, I will do that. So here we go. And the image that you will see is the chart of today. And the software I'm using is Sri Jyoti Star. You can use any software you like. This is the software that I choose to use. And I'm just going to make it a little bigger. So You see the title there says now Boone. So I'm living in Boone, North Carolina. And this is the date and the time on which I cast the chart. So when I do a reading, I will just take you through this screen very quickly. I will orient the person to this sheet, just like I'm going to orient you and anyone who's listening and watching. So the largest square that you see, that's the natal chart. So that is that represents the time that the chart was cast. There are squares underneath that shows charts from different perspective. So the D9 is that you'll see that there's a title.
I was going to ask you about, is that Navansha?
That's Navansha, yeah. And this, can I, I can't, I don't have a pointer, so hopefully.
Okay. I'll try and be the pointer if we stay within this square.
Okay. Okay.
So
let's just say, so we're in the main square where it says at the top, now Boone D1. Yeah?
Yeah.
So there's the square, and within the square, you see diamond shapes and triangle shapes, and each shape represents a house. The houses, this is a North Indian chart. South Indian has a different way to show the houses, but this is North Indian. So each of these shapes is a house. The houses never move. So where you see it says AS and ME, that is the first house. AS stands for ascendant, and the first house represents the eastern horizon. So the ascendant is the point on the eastern horizon where the constellation was rising. Constellations and planets, they rise on the eastern horizon. So that is always the first house. The numbers that you see refer to the constellations. The reason why we see just the numbers of the constellations is because the houses never move, but the constellations move through time. So we show the numbers of the constellations. Yes?
I just ask a quick question.
Yes.
So this is house number 1. And then because the southern chart goes in the opposite direction to the North Indian. So where would number 2 be?
So the second house is to the left where you see the number 8.
Okay, so we're going this direction, 8,
So
9.
you're counterclockwise.
Okay, so here we go like this.
And for me, I cannot see your pointer, so I'm not sure if people through the recording would be able to see it. But I can describe it and say that where you see the 7 is the first house, where you see the 8 is the second house, where you see the 9 is the third house, and so on. So if you continue counterclockwise, you will eventually reach the 12th house where you see the number 6. Now, if we go back to the first house where you see the number 7, 7 represents Libra. So what I tell people is when you leave from this interaction and you go home and you look at this box with numbers, you're like, what is 7? I don't know what sign that is. You can look anywhere in the world to see a list of the constellations, and they will always be in the same order. So Aries will always be number 1, and Pisces will always be number 12, and number 7 will always be Libra.
So it goes Aries, Taurus,
Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So
first
here,
house with Libra.
Yep, exactly.
Now, I'm just asking questions because I remember this is bringing back memories from when I came to visit you maybe 7 years ago. We were in Albuquerque and you were showing me all this.
Yeah.
So first house, Libra. What does the first house represent? I always get mixed up with the houses. House number 1, number 2, number 3.
Yeah. So first house, We look to the first house as kind of setting the major themes of your life. It represents you as an individual. It represents you as like your general character, you could say. So if we were looking at this chart in terms of a person, we would say that you were born into this world with a Libra ascendant, which implies that what motivates you in this lifetime is negotiating relationships. Libra is a sign of relationships, and they are driven to always create harmony within a relationship. So then we can infer additional meaning to that, like you might be someone that continually finds yourself seeking positions where you're working specific to relationships, which can extend to working one-on-one with clients, perhaps becoming a counselor. And so just infusing interaction with people on a one-to-one basis. And then, okay, so that would be like the main theme. And then what we would do in Vedic astrology is we would also look at the nakshatra of the ascendant. So where it says AS and it shows the 436, that's 4 degrees and 36 minutes. So this says that the constellation had risen, Libra had risen at 4 degrees 36 minutes. So this makes this nakshatra in Chitra nakshatra.
Mm-hmm.
So what this means is, so now this person that has a Libra ascendant that is connected to this relational type of theme, you could say, now has their character infused with the Chitra chakra, Shakti. And so that nakshatra is going to give certain energies to propel that person to act in a certain way. So they might be more driven towards, Chitra is one of the nakshatras in professions, let's say, that's connected with architecture and designing and planning. The deity of Chitra is Vishvakarma, and he is known as a celestial architect. So I think he's the head dude for Vastu, maybe. Don't quote me on that. I have to.
But basically, this person with this ascendant could tap into that energy easily, you're saying.
Exactly, like that energy is more accessible for that person. And then that energy becomes even more accessible depending upon the time period that they're in, and depending upon how it's activated for them.
Right. So then if we move from, we've also got, is that Mercury, 8 degrees?
Yeah. So Emmy is in the first house with Mercury. So this can suggest that this person is very good in communicating. Mercury in Libra is going to give the energy for wanting to communicate openly with others in relationships, let's just say, is a very general statement. And then we would look at, well, what houses does Mercury own in this person's chart? So in this person's chart, Mercury owns the 9th house, where you see the number 3, and also the 12th house, where you see the number 6. So that's another layer that we won't go into right now.
But then you have relationships of those planets, I guess, as well. Let's go to the second house.
Okay, so actually, so we can just say very simply that wherever Mercury is placed in your chart shows the style in which you like to communicate, shows the area in which you like to do research, and where you work with communicating and understanding. Where Venus is placed in your chart shows the area in life in which you receive pleasure, the areas that you enjoy in life. The second house is to do with food, as well as immediate family. And it's also to do with communication, with speech and talking. In this second house, Scorpio is the constellation there. Venus being in Scorpio And so Venus placed here is saying this person has a love of food, and a love of, let's say, communicating, and probably has good connections to their family. Again, this is all very general.
What about going deep? Going deep, because Scorpio likes deep stuff.
Exactly. And so this is going to create more a more of a passionate more motivation for this person in those areas, because Venus and in Scorpio creates this sort of passion combination, because Scorpio is owned by Mars. So wherever Venus and Mars are together, they're like, the best buddies for a good raucous time.
Yeah, that's what I have in my 10th house, which is in Scorpio. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes. Yes. Okay, that's great about second house. I always get, it's a bit gray for me, the houses, some of the houses. And then
Yeah.
number three, house number three.
Yeah, so house number three is also to do with communication, but it's more written communication. So this is the house where we might look to see at if, like writing abilities. That's one of them. But third house is also to do with travel, but travel in short durations, short journeys. So short errands throughout the day, needing to drive around a lot and take care of a lot of short things. It's also connected to skills. So it's connected to the hands. And so anybody that has their work or actions that they do throughout the day, physical labor, also connected to massage therapists or anybody that does energy work through their hands, or artists, things like this. And it's also the house of the younger of siblings. And when we look at it a little bit closer, with younger siblings. So this is where we can infer information from the younger siblings.
Right. And then and then we've got number four. Is number four number 10?
Correct. Number four, the fourth house is in this chart where 10 is, and 10 is Capricorn. And the fourth house is the house of the home. So this is where we look at to see themes that might transpire within your home life, particularly home and growing up within the home. It is the house that shows our general state of happiness. And it's also connected to cars, real estate, and that's about it that I can remember right now.
Okay. Well, so there's nothing in there. Sure. Is the next one number 11 here?
Yeah, the next one is number 11, fifth house. So in the fourth house that we were just in, how you had mentioned, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
But we need to remember there is, because this fourth house, this fourth house is Capricorn. So this is going to say for this person, they're going to have this theme of a Capricorn within their home life, let's say, and their general state of happiness will be infused with Capricorn flavors. And Capricorn is one of the signs that is focused on work and responsibility, and they love to work, they love to organize, and so this is what motivates them in their life. So for this person, they might have had a very structured home, it might have been very organized, it might have been an experience where things were, very regimented. And then who owns Capricorn? So all the constellations have an owner or a lord, and Saturn is the lord of Capricorn. So then what we can do is we can fuse in what that home life meaning and get more detail for that home life meaning by looking at where Saturn has gone. So now that we've gone to the fifth house, what we can say is Saturn has gone from the fourth house to the fifth house. And so that ties in both those meanings together. The fifth house is to do, the fifth house, we look to the fifth house as like the first stage in life, you can say, where our discernment starts to fructify. We become a little bit more aware of our intellectual capacity. It's where we start to have more of a logical thinking, a logical pursuit. Fifth house is also connected with children. Fifth house is connected with creativity. So creativity, procreation of children, and also procreation of ideas. And here we have Saturn, and here the sign is Aquarius. That's number 11. So Saturn also owns Aquarius. Now, Saturn is in its own sign in Aquarius in the fifth house. And for a Libra ascendant, which is what we have here, Saturn is known as is very auspicious, because Saturn in a Libra ascendant owns two benefic houses. Fourth and fifth are benefic houses. These are positive houses. These are houses where that carry more positive energies in terms of things that actions and experiences that may transpire more smoothly and efficiently.
Mhm.
So the next house, shall I keep going? You want to
Yeah,
ask?
number 12. Number
Okay.
12.
So the next house is the sixth house, where we see 12, and 12 is the constellation of Pisces. The
Right.
sixth house is to do with, we look to the sixth house for matters pertaining to health. Sixth house also represents enemies, and we can look at enemies in terms of, well, anybody that contradicts us, I suppose. So it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be drastic, but so any kind of opposition.
Yeah,
What's that?
I was going
Yeah.
to say conflict.
Yeah, conflict, opposition. Sixth house is also to do with employment. So like a steady employment. It's a service house. It's a house of service. It's also connected with debt.
Here we've got Rahu and the moon.
Yeah, so here we have Rahu and moon. So as I mentioned, the fourth and fifth house is one of these positive houses. Sixth house is considered a negative house because it's to do with things I just mentioned: debt, conflict, health for good or bad. And so we look, when we're looking at the sixth house, we can say, okay, this is an area of challenge in the life. So how is this person going to be able to manage this challenge? Rahu, so RA, Rahu, and then we have K2, KE, which is up in the 12th house, which we'll talk about later. These are not grahas, planets. These are points within the universe. And we can say that they're very similar to the North and South node in Western astrology. And Rahu and K2 are symbolized by the upper half of a body and the lower half of a body. And the upper half, being Rahu, is the mouth that always wants more. So if you visualize, the upper half of a body, Rahu is wonderful because Rahu gives us energy. It gives us unending, so to speak, energy and desire, and enables us to pursue whatever it is we need to. And therefore, Rahu teaches us that we don't need to pursue things all the time. Rahu teaches us to be able to feel complete in where we are. But in order to do that, we have to experience Rahu in all of its glory. Where the moon is placed in our chart shows us our thinking patterns and how we like to receive emotional support. So moon with Rahu can tend to create a heightened sense of need, you can say. Moon with Rahu in Pisces is considered one of the more spiritually inclined. I mean, we're all spiritually inclined, but Pisces has more of a push to travel into the realms of the unknown and spirit, and connecting with that type of energy. Seventh house. Next house is the seventh house, where the one is, and one is Aries. So the seventh house is the relationship house. So looking at the first house where the 7 is, and then looking down below it is the seventh house. Sorry, the numbers might be confusing. Is the seventh house where the 1 is. So what we can say is these houses are looking at each other, just
Yeah.
like you are on this screen looking at me. So we can say that you are the first house and that I am the seventh house. So we can say, we can look at the chart the exact same way. So we're going to be influencing each other when we look across at each other.
Right.
Anyway, so seventh house is the house of relationships, which we look at for how we are going to relate to the world in general, as well as, so this is love relationships, work relationships, any type of relationship, really. The next house is the 8th house, where we see a 2 and we see JP there. So JP is Jupiter, and it has a line underneath, just like Saturn did. And what this line represents is retrogression. So in Vedic astrology, when we have a retrograde planet, we look at that as giving it more energy, again, for better or for worse. And retrogression implies things that we're looking over again. It doesn't necessarily imply that it's going to create havoc. You know, we have this Mercury retrogression fear. Everything's in Mercury retrograde, everything's falling apart. So we can look at it as to going over things again, just double checking. So what it can imply is wherever we have a retrograde planet, it's going to cause us to be more invested in those themes or those topics. And then we learn when we don't need to invest so much energy, you know, that's a lesson for that. But the 8th house is one of the transformational houses that's called a moksha house. We have that. The 4th house is a moksha house, the 8th house is a moksha house, and the 12th house is a moksha house. Moksha is transformation. So it's this transformation of a very, very deep level that requires us to face ourselves, you know, look at the mirror that's fully clean without any blemishes on it, and then go within to transform, to be transformed.
Would
So
you, I was just going to ask, you know, you said that moksha is transformation. Would you not also say that it's liberation, or is that
yes, yeah, it's liberation. So it's transformation and liberation. And what is liberation but transforming from this physical structure chain to this earth, transforming and being liberated into a realm where we're not attached to all these earthly things that continue to cause us this cycle of questioning and struggle. So yeah, and in particular, the 8th house is connected to, this is where we say it's connected to yoga and Ayurveda and astrology. It has a lot of the themes that Scorpio represents to do with transformation, liberation, research, going down deep and going, you know, really spending effort and going down into the deep things.
Yeah. Okay. And then we've got Mars here.
Yeah.
Is
The
that
next house. Yeah, the next house is the 9th house, where Mars is in the sign of Gemini. And the 9th house is connected to Dharma. It's one of the Dharma houses. So we have the 1st house is a Dharma house, the 5th house is a Dharma, 9th house is a Dharma house. So this is where we can look to this house as what is this, what is the drive for this person in life? What is their purpose? And Dharma, in terms of purpose, is just fulfilling your purpose in life, is fulfilling the purpose of being content in whatever you pursue, and you have certain traits that allow you to fulfill that purpose. And while you fulfill that purpose, how can you also support others around you? So this is kind of the mental, emotional place to situate yourself in for Dharma.
Right.
Uh, it's also connected to father, and also travel. So, if you're thinking of taking a long trip, this is one of the houses we'll look at for travel.
Got you.
The
And
next, sorry,
yeah. No, no,
uh,
number 10.
yeah, the next house where the number 4 is Cancer, and this is the 10th house. So this is one of the houses of Artha. So Artha is wealth, and this is what we look at for career. Like this is the theme in life in which you may form your career around. So when someone comes and asks me, well, I'm thinking of I'm not sure, let's say it's a college student and they're like, I'm not sure what type of career I should pursue, and these are the things that I'm thinking about. Then we would look at their 10th house, and then we would also look at subcharts, just like their subdashas, their subcharts. So we would look at the subchart that's particular to career, and we would analyze that for them.
Cool.
The next house, the 11th house, has the number 5 in it, which is Leo. And the 11th house is about community. 11th house is where we look to see how we connect to community, friends, social activities. 11th house is also one of the wealth houses, and it can show the fruits of our work life. So the money, it shows money from work. But the second house is also connected to money, but that is money more in terms of like net assets, and also money from family, you could say handed down. But 11th house is more like the money that you get through your own efforts from work. And then finally, and also the 11th house is connected to older siblings. So, and then finally we get to the 12th house, where we see the number 6, which is Virgo. And the 12th house is the final moksha, liberation, transformation place. And the 12th house represents meditation, represents retreats. It also represents hospitalizations. So it represents long stays of any sort. And it also represents long distance travel. So, and long distance relocation. Here we have the Sun and Ketu, Ketu being the bottom half of Rahu Ketu. And if Rahu is the mouth that always wants more, that we learn from Rahu that we don't always need more, Ketu then is the bottom half that says, I have everything. I don't need anything. In fact, I don't need you. I don't need that. I don't know this. I don't need anything. And through Ketu, we learn, well, actually, we do need things. We are this human manifestation on earth. And yes, we do need to connect with people. So this is what Ketu teaches us.
And you've got the sun here.
Say it again?
You've got the sun there in the 12th.
Yeah, we got the sun there. So where the sun is placed in our chart shows us the area in life in which we want to be recognized for, right? The sun shines without even needing to, right? People are like, tone it down, sun. And he's like, I can't help it. I just shine and I'm bright, leave me alone. So the sun in the 12th house, as we said, that the 12th house is this house of long stays and final liberation. The sun's motivation, well, I don't know. I was going to say the sun's motivation isn't to be finally liberated. I mean, I think we can say that, because if the sun is finally liberated, he'll never shine. So So with the sun in the 12th house, this can indicate for someone that has this that they might their courage and their sense of self shining in the world might be more challenging for them. And this is what they're here to learn in this lifetime, is how to shine their shine and be comfortable with that. I
Mhm.
talked about things being opposite each other. So, just like the first house looks at the seventh house and vice versa, houses also look across from each other diagonally and horizontally. So, K2 and Sun being in the 12th house, if you go all the way down diagonally to where the sixth house is, where Rahu and Moon are, the sixth and 12th house always look opposite each other. Rahu and Ketu are always connect two houses together because they're always diagonal. And you see here there's moon and sun. So in 2 days we're going to have a full moon. Is it a full moon? Yes, it's a full moon. And you can tell it's a full moon because moon and sun will always be opposite each other. Now, Rahu and Ketu are the reason why we have eclipses. We are not going to have an eclipse in a few days because the degrees of separation are too far from Rahu and Ketu. But if we were looking at this chart in the beginning of the month, we would have seen the degrees very close on top of the sun or the moon. The sun. It would have been the sun. And that would have created the eclipse. So this is one of the reasons why Rahu and Ketu are the veils. They're considered the veils with which we experience in life. And we try to understand how to remove that veil. And it's these veils that create these eclipses of the sun and the moon, representing eclipsing our subconscious, eclipsing our illumination, eclipsing our knowing of the deeper self, while at the same time needing Rahu and Ketu in order to go deeper, to be able to understand those veils.
Yeah, that's lovely, Easter. Thank you. Also, I'm just looking at this chart. It's quite interesting that the eclipsing um, Rahu and Ketu are actually in the same house as the sun and moon, which eclipse.
That is what happens. Whenever there's an eclipse, Rahu and Ketu are involved. So there can only be an eclipse when the sun and moon are with Rahu and Ketu on exact degrees.
Right. So that's what's going on here.
Yeah. So let's pretend that in 2 days we're going to have a solar eclipse.
Mm-hmm.
We could see that in the chart if Ketu and Rahu were at the exact same degrees as the sun and the moon.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I see what you mean.
And it would be a lunar eclipse if the moon and sun were in the same house together with Rahu and Ketu influencing.
Mm-hmm. I got you. I
Yeah.
don't let's not go too deep in case we lose some people on this first
Yeah.
conversation together.
Yeah. And
Um,
please everyone fact check that because I get things mixed up sometime. It could be the sun and moon are opposite with exact degrees of a solar eclipse, and sun and moon together with a lunar. Anyway, an eclipse happens. That is for sure.
Well, you know what? That's very useful for people to understand how a chart is read, especially, if you go to a Vedic astrologer, sometimes they think they'll just send you, this is your thing, and you're looking at some diagram and you have no idea how to read it. So this is
Yeah.
very useful. But can I ask you to stop sharing now, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm just paying attention to time because I
Yeah.
like to keep this under an hour.
Yeah.
But so I'm going to discard a few questions, i.e. nakshatra going deeper. I would have liked to ask you about the mythology, which probably relates to a lot of um, Puranas or texts that have the stories in there, and also the stories or more about the characteristics of the planets. But
Mm-hmm.
let's just take Saturn because Saturn is a biggie. And there's quite a lot about Saturn that I'd like to, chat to you about. But um, I'd like to maybe relate this to the difference between Vedic astrology and Western astrology, because there's the moon. Maybe we can look at that next time in more detail. But let's just talk about the 7.5 years, the of Saturn that everyone dreads.
Okay, all right. Um, so first I'd like to say that everybody has this 7.5 years of Saturn, known as Sati Sati. And I'd also like to say, relax and allow yourself to not get fixated on the 7.5 years of Saturn Sati Sati, but be mindful of it. So what this means is Saturn takes around 30 years. It's like 28 years, and then there can be retrogression, but it takes around between 28 and 30 years for it to go through your whole chart. It spends about 2.5 years in each sign, in each house. When Saturn arrives in the house before your natal moon, and it's on your natal moon, and then it travels to the house after your natal moon, this is known as Sati Sati.
Ah,
And Sati Sati, so Sati Sati, Saturn, Shani, in Sanskrit. Shani is known as the slow walker. When Shani comes into town, he's checking that you've done everything you're supposed to do, right? We all grow up with things that we're supposed to do. We learn this from our parents to greater extremes or to less extremes. Brush your teeth, wash your face. No, you can't go out unless you've done your homework first. The more you fight, the more grief you experience. So as a child, you learn, okay, I need to follow these rules, or you learn, I'm going to figure a way out of this. I'm going to pretend I did my homework and got to play. Anyway, so when Shani comes into town, he's checking to see that you've been responsible and you've gotten everything in place. So this can affect each person differently, depending upon the house it's traveling in, and the strength of your planets, let's say. Someone that's experiencing Sati Sati when it travels through the house of career can then find big shifts in their career, either the direction that they want to take their career in, either needing to leave their job and find another job, getting a promotion within their career. Shani also rewards. Shani doesn't always give us a sense of heaviness and oppression or constriction. He also rewards, but Shani does reward, and this is the key in Jyotish. Shani does reward when you've done what you're supposed to do. So like with anything in the chart, even if you have a really great placement of a planet, let's say Shani in this case, Shani in Aquarius, who owns Aquarius, even if you have that great placement, you still need to do some work, right? So Shani is happy in Aquarius. He's going to more easily shower the positive attributes of that, but you still need to do your work. The fact that this is aligned with the moon tells us that the way we experience the world is through our mind. So whatever we perceive, no matter what anybody tells us, it's always in our mind. It's always in our mind thought. So Shani going through the mind can then create a little bit of friction, because what is the moon? The moon wants to love. The moon will shine if the radiance is on the moon, right? But if there's heaviness, the mind is going to feel heavy. So it's there are those attributes too.
Just on a side note, because I know you like Sanskrit as well. The great thing about Sanskrit is that you've got the answer within the language. So you said Shani is the slow mover, and the word Shane is slowly, slowly.
Ah,
That's so
beautiful.
beautiful, yeah?
Yeah.
So
Oh.
what about the Saturn return in Western astrology? Is that slightly different? Do you know much about that?
Um, I would say no, it's I don't know about Western, but we do have that in Vedic astrology. So Saturn return is when Saturn comes back to the place where Saturn was in your birth chart. So for instance, we just looked at that chart where Saturn was in Aquarius. And that chart was the chart of what's happening right now in the sky. So if you were born when Saturn was in Aquarius in your chart, that means that that house, whatever the house is, so your chart could be let's say the 10th house again. In your chart, your 10th house could have Aquarius in it with Saturn, and by transit, that's where Saturn is. So what's going to be more prominent for you in your day-to-day life are things to do with your career, because Saturn by transit has come back into the same place and is activating all of those themes. And slow walker, Shani, he's very meticulous.
Thorough.
So
I'm gonna say thorough, yeah.
yeah, very thorough, very meticulous. So and this could be a good thing. And I would say that it's all good. It's all good because we're here to learn, and we're here to evolve if we're able to, right? And and that depends upon our circumstances. It depends upon how we live, what capacity we are able to live in terms of money and comforts and support, and the abundance of it or the lack thereof. And we're just here to do the best that we can. And with Jyotish, we can see more clearly time periods in which we have more of a ability to maneuver more freely, and we have times when okay, we're going to have to be more structured and maybe not do as much, because Shani's come into town and he's also telling me that right now too.
Yeah. Okay, just very quickly, Easter, because we mentioned it, just the idea of karma in Jyotish.
Okay, so let's see. Karma in Jyotish. Karma, just simply action. No good karma, no bad karma.
Mhm.
Karma is just karma, it's just action. Your chart is the action or the energy. Your karma is a fixed point in time. And this fixed point in time is all this energy that is influencing you as you come into this world. It shows the possibility for certain things to transpire at certain periods of time in your life. Let's say when you get into your Venus Dasha, it says here that you're going to move to a different country. So we can say that is your karma when you get into your Venus time, because that action has been set in time. And then when you get to your Venus Dasha, the other things that you have done along the way that you acted, the things that you said, things that were said to you, or actions that were taken to you, have all created a shift in your karmic patterns, because it's all energy and energy shifts all the time. So that when you get to your Venus Dasha to move to a foreign country, you actually end up just moving to the next county. So this is, I don't know if that makes
This is a
sense.
bigger conversation, I think. This is
Yeah,
a conversation. Because
yeah,
then I'm like, we have to look at karma with dharma, and it's gonna get huge. So I'm gonna save that for our next chat together, if I may.
Yes.
Well, I did promise people that I was going to ask you some questions about how to deal with the change of seasons. So Northern Hemisphere, we're deep into autumn now. Southern Hemisphere will be in spring. And even though they're opposites, they're still the same Vata
Mm-hmm.
uh, uh, season. And personally, I feel like stiff if I don't do some oiling. I can feel it
Mm-hmm.
in my joints. My body's responding to what's going on externally. And seeing as well, you are the best person to ask on a few little advice tidbits that you can give us. Self-care.
So you're already on the right track with oiling. So putting oil on the body on a daily oiling, and if you can't do daily oiling, at least once a week, is very good because oil is grounding. And as you said, Vata season, Vata is dry. Vata is the element of air and space, so it creates dryness and it creates more fluctuations in the mind. So shifting of seasons, it's just shifting of energies, oiling every day, focusing on foods that are warming. So really nice broths, soups, trying not to have cold salads or cold drinks. So warming foods and looking at your daily schedule and creating a consistent schedule. And so if you're not able to have not able to have your whole day be regimented, let's say, at least try and fix when you eat your lunch every day. Try and fix the same time for that, or pick one meal when you can do that, because the more that you're able to have a steady and regular digestive cycle, that's also going to help Vata, because it's also going to help your elimination. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Easter. That's really been illuminating, building a bigger picture. And I hope that I get to talk to you again in the near future.
Yeah, I hope so too. And thank you very much, Natasha, for keeping me on track.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Easter.
Thank
Living in harmony is way more fun than fighting the higher powers. And I think that Easter has given us some tools to do that. Actually, it reminds me of a Gurdjieff quote. Maybe you know this, Easter. In knowing yourself, one knows the universe, and in knowing the universe, one knows the self. And I think that can always help us along the path. So there we have it. I hope that that's been helpful to you as much as it has to me, and I look forward to seeing you very soon. Thanks for joining and tuning in. Stay hydrated, try and get a rhythm, and oil if you can. See you soon. Bye for now.